There we go. All right. Well, again, thank you everyone so much for being here. I just shared the link in the chat to the podcast that these guys host if people are not familiar, so everyone can check that out. But yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. Great to be back with 12 Winters and celebrating more writing from both of these authors from the press. Um, our plan for the evening is we're gonna have short readings. So Dad's gonna read first, we agreed, and then Grant will read. I'll let you both introduce yourselves a little bit more when you read. And then we'll open it up for some Q&A for questions about the writing process and these books and the various brilliance and wisdom that Dad and Grant have to share. So I believe that with that, we'll just dive right into reading. Sound good? All right. Well, I'll turn it over to Brady Harrison uh, to read.
Well, thank you, Hayes. I appreciate that. Uh, so yes, Hayes, I mean, everyone here, I think, probably knows or deduced that Hayes is my daughter. So thank you, Hayes. Thank you to Ted. Thank you to all of you. And congratulations to Grant. I'm delighted to be reading with Grant. Some folks won't know, but Grant and I went to grad school together. And so we are very old friends. And when we were in grad school, Grant had a radio show on WEFT 90.1, a punk rock show, and he would invite me in periodically to help talk about the music and the select songs. And that was one of the absolutely great times of life. So, yeah, I remember those days so fondly, Grant. Meanwhile, the occasion, a journey to Al Ramel. So my thanks to Ted as publisher. This is the second or third book, depending on how you count, of mine that Ted has brought out. But this is the first novel, so I'm delighted. And it was a labor of love, was it not, Ted? Because the person who wrote this book, it was a little bit crazy in formatting um, and things I tried to do on the page that fit on a computer screen, but then as it turns out, don't fit when you size it down to book size. So there was a lot of editing involved. So I just want to thank Ted for his patience. Okay, so I'm going to read from very early on in the novel. And it's the story of a young French aspiring poet, an aspiring adventurer, an aspiring filmmaker. He doesn't quite know what to do in life, but he has finished his graduate studies in anthropology and archaeology, and he has served his military service in Morocco. And during that time, when he was in Morocco, he heard about an abandoned city. It's not so much a city; it was just a kind of trading post. But it was a place called Al Ramel, and so he decides, with his brother's help, that he will go in search of this place in the desert. And so he sets out with some Berber guides, but they feel that the safest way for him to travel is if he's disguised as a woman, because then men won't be allowed to speak to him and he can maintain some anonymity in that way. And so he's at this point in the narrative, he's dressed as a Berber woman, and he's been on the trail. They've been on the trail towards working their way to Al Ramel uh, for about a week or so. But he's totally exhausted, and although he knows Morocco pretty well, he's not in great shape for this journey, and he's suffering quite badly uh, from dehydration and exhaustion. So this is where it picks up, and the short part I'll read for you today. So this is Tuesday, September 17th, 1930, in what is called the Spanish Sahara, uh, a disputed region south of Morocco. So it begins. Yesterday we stopped in sight of Al Haxas. Once more we stopped in plain view and settled down to wait for darkness. In the valley below us and on the hills all around, Arabs and Berbers swarmed like insects. All of my companions, Al Mabul, Larbi, Boos, the toad, and even Fatma, kept barking and hissing at me. Boujma, keep covered. Boujma, lay down. Boujma, conceal your hands and feet. Boujma, do not be so restless. Torture. I felt like an animal in a heavy, airless cage, only you wouldn't treat an animal as they treated me, swearing and pushing at me. The sun poured down, pure heat and pulsating, suffocating waves. Sweat ran off my nose, off my chin, and down my neck and back. It stung my eyes. I could not find a comfortable position inside my Jabella tent. I writhed this way and that, the stone sharp and hot, poking through the heavy, suffocating material into my skin. I kept calling for water, kept demanding that we cease this stillness, this sun-soaked, baking agony, and get underway. Alternately, they ignored or hissed at me, insisting that I be quiet and still. Once, someone even kicked me, though not roughly. After intervals of what seemed hours, they would bring me small cups of the putrid mud water. Sweat dripping on this journal as I try to write, soaking the page, pencil tearing into the soft palm tree-shaped welts. Clement, he's writing his brother a letter as he's waiting. His brother's name is Clement. Clement, is this life? Is this being alive? If so, I might have to rethink my earlier claims. Here I am, alive and stinking, filthy, itchy. Am I getting lice? Wanting to leap from a mountain and scream at the sun. Alive and suffering horribly, a limp, sodden, enraged sack of sun-blasted self. I could use a bath and evidently lice powder. Nearly suffocating, I found myself recalling the last time I had seen the philosopher. I did not speak to him then. The Prussian with the enormous mustaches and way of looking down at everyone in disbelief or with animus. It was well after he had left the university to begin his gypsy life of hotel rooms and restaurants, living on a pension and what his friends gave to him. Yes, the Superman. He was sitting at a small round table at the back of a malevolent cafe just off the Bahnhofstrasse. There were too many things and too few people stuffed into the place. The walls, draped in something silky the color of dried blood, were decorated with immense paintings of mountains and lakes with pines, and set here and there between the paintings were mismatched mirrors encased in profusions and repulsions of scrollwork. All but ringing the room were black oak sideboards, while the floor itself was crowded with scores of the small, squat, black table at which he sat. In turn, each table was surrounded, as if wagons circled to defend against attack, by several correspondingly uncomfortable, immovable, foreboding chairs. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like stalactites, threatening all but the shortest of the partakers of tea or coffee and a pastry. There was nowhere to walk, nowhere I could see to reach a table. Once there was no room to pull the chair away if one were strong enough to pull it away. If the place seemed designed to squeeze joy from a person's soul, the patrons matched the furniture and wall paraphernalia. Everyone was old or wanted to be old and smelled of camphor and damp fur in closets nobody remembered to use. Perhaps he was waiting for his Salome, though she would not come. Perhaps he waited for Ree, but he would not come. They had gone to Berlin without him. I had seen them at the train station. I had tried to lift Ree's wallet, but I kept getting distracted by Salome. I could not see what either saw in her. Like so much in life, none of my business, and I gave up on the theft. He had a pot of coffee and an untouched basket of bread at the top of the table, a tass and a saucer beside his left hand, and a sheaf of loosely arranged papers taking up the remaining space. He kept his head down, his eyesight already beginning to fail, struggling to read what he had written, adding more and then more, deliberately, methodically, a line or two, a blocky paragraph, another half page, a page front and back, all the time head down, working, not looking around at the others, the ashen, the attendants of Niflheim. Once he looked up and asked the waiter for another pen or two and some writing paper. Slowly, carefully, steadily, always steadily, he wrote. He did not touch his coffee or bread. He was, in his dedication, magnificent. After finishing my small, bitter coffee, I left quickly as I could. An old woman at the centermost table, a fox pelt ouroboros consuming itself around her neck, quite possibly had died. Her eyes wide but glazed, gurgles of decomposition sounding from her open mouth, her open drooling mouth, while her equally elderly friends chatted amiably on, nodding at each other, evidently not noticing that their friend had expired. Even as I watched, choking down the dregs of my coffee, the dead woman appeared to swell, as if she had died a few hours before she came in, determined, as she evidently had been, to pass officially and finally in a suitable place. As I sidled past, afraid to touch and therefore dislodge her, a long, bubbly whistle sounded from the usual place, and the whole cafe smelled of death. I held my breath and scrambled as best I could for the front doors and the street. The time before, I had seen him in the gardens of the Villa Silberblick, not long before his death. And he did not speak, but sat weeping, his hands clasped to his forehead, heels covering his eyes. He was gaunt and shrunk and small, almost like a little boy, save for the walrus mustache and balding pate. When I tried to ask him if it was the whipping of the horse in turn that broke his heart, or was it the war in the Crimea, or his nerves, or his father, or the matter of whom we love or desire, he could not or would not answer. Was it, I wanted to know, syphilis? Was it the opium or sedatives? Was the madness always there? Had he talked himself into it? Was it because the emperor would not travel to Rome and have himself shot? Before I left, I wrote on a scrap of paper and handed it to him. How can anything dead be? Too far gone, he looked at me, eyes brimming with tears, blinking, probably blind or nearly so. I tucked the bit of paper into his coat pocket. You will tell me if you ever know. At last, when I could not take my imprisonment any more, I sat up, staggered to my feet, and made it known to El Mabul and the others that I would engage them, would not allow myself to be forced back under suffocating cover. They looked at me as if they had no idea what I was talking about. El Mabul made his eyes wide and shrugged his shoulders as if to say, if you were uncomfortable, you should have told us, and we would have done everything in our power to make you at ease. Okay, I'll stop there. So he's sweating. It's hot. He's covered in lice. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Papa. I'll warn everyone if you have not yet endeavored, if you have not done the essay, as the character in this book would say, to read this book, you'll find it twists and turns in ways you don't expect. So everybody like go in with eyes wide open for reading A Journey to Ramel. And we'll now turn to Grant reading a bit from his new book and then kind of come back to Q&A. So everybody, keep part of your mind in the Spanish Sahara and then journey with us to Toronto. I'll turn it over to you, Grant.
Thanks. Yeah, I timed myself. That's going to take 15 minutes and 27 seconds. So I don't want to do a lot of bloviation. I'm just going to get right to it. Not that you bloviated, Brady. It was fantastic. You're such a fucking great writer, man. I'm just a pulp writer. That was beautiful. Seriously. So I'm going to read a short story called A Cap for Tom. It's features Eddie Sands, a cab driver, and Eddie's going to appear in the fifth Hayden Fuller novel, helping him solve a crime in Canada involving Indigenous peoples. But this is A Cap for Tom, set in Winsome, which is a made-up upstate New York place, kind of modeled a little bit on Watertown and a little bit on Seneca Falls and a whole lot on Peterborough, Ontario, where I got my undergrad at Trent University. Cap for Tom. Nurses and interns rushed Tom Reynolds down the hall, one of the gurney's wheels sticking, stuttering. Everything was a blur of white, tiles, walls, track lights. A knife was in Tom's leg. I brought him here in my cab shouting, "Apply pressure! Damn it, apply pressure!" Now I lit a lucky, ambled to the lobby. The police wanted a word. Officer Mooney, a young fellow with a jarhead cut and a scalp line dusted with copper filings, asked me to repeat the story 3 times. Mooney, 3 hours ago, I picked up a different Tom. I knew his name because it was embroidered on his filling station shirt. He'd been drinking, his jittery hands tracing rapid half circles above my heating vents. From his wallet, he read an address off a ribbon of paper. "Take me there," he said. Dawes Motel, other side of Winsome. He sat forward in the front seat. I usually don't let folks sit there, but he was 6'5", 6'6", and said there wasn't enough legroom in back. Late autumn wind whipped candy wrappers along the roadside. The closer we edged the motel, the more desolate the area became. No sidewalks, no trees. Within minutes, we were there, and he hopped from my hack while it was rolling to a stop. He hugged the gym bag as if it were a small bomb. I wondered if I should reach for my .45 in the glove box. A lanky guy in black plaid stood in the arc of the motel room's dim backlighting. His right eyebrow arched higher than his left as dramatic monologue before him tumbled. Tom's feet were planted to the front patio as if it were flypaper, his free hand drawing louder and louder, half circles. A woman's voice from beyond the door climbed above Tom's words. Penciled streaks of rain fell. Tom returned, shoulder stained with scales of thin ice, and stretched in the front seat. "Wrong guy." He laughed. It was full of sad resignation. "Drive around," he said. "Wrong guy. Wrong guy." I shrugged vaguely, lit a lucky, and shook one free for him. Around it is. We wandered downtown side streets for 40 minutes or so, fishing lines of rain glittering. He gave me an address to an all-night laundromat. "And that's the story, Mooney." The odd part? Mooney's eyes narrowed, face tightening with command presence. "Yeah?" "The guy in plaid at the motel, the fellow who answered the door, he's the second Tom, the one I later drove to the hospital with a knife in his leg." So what did I not tell Officer Mooney? Me and the first Tom didn't drive for 40 minutes before hitting a laundromat, more like 10. I pulled over near a deserted phone booth that shook in the shimmer of streetlight. The side streets were now painted black. I hoped plows were salting the roads. "You served, didn't you?" he asked, gym bag close to his chest. "Yeah, Korea, Pork Chop Hill. Occasionally, I still slept with a gun under my pillow." Christ, that was a meat grinder. You served?" "Big red one. World War II, North Africa, Czechoslovakia, Italy, liberated Jews from Falkenau. When he came home, he sat on his mother's porch for days, clutching his carbine, catching the bend of the evening sun. You got someone, somebody?" "No," I said. "You like being alone?" "No." He nodded. He knew the Susan Norgett story. The paper loved to cover my exploits. 2 months ago, I rescued her from a suicide attempt, Dawes Motel. She checked in without a bag and gave me too big of a tip to warrant the $3.50 call. He rubbed at the scraped spaces around his mouth. I figured the fellow must shave 3 to 4 times a day. There were no traces of licorice stubble. "You like her?" "Susan? Yeah, I do," I said. "But she's married. You like me?" There was so much desperation behind the question that I wasn't quite sure how to take it. "I don't know. You seem like a nice fella." Tom's wife, Emily, was a supportive type, school teacher, 3rd grade. Anyway, she read all that Jack and McCall's, about helping veterans feel at home. His right hand circling was now drawing a series of small stones. "You feel at home?" Sometimes." His lips were a broken line, sticking to parts of his teeth. I wondered if he were getting help from the VA. "Help?" Shit, that shut him down. I offered to buy him dinner at Gus's. No, thanks. I just got laundry I want to do, that's all." "Laundry? There can't be much in that bag." "There's enough," he said. An hour later, after leaving the other Tom at the hospital, I had a run of calls. The bars had just closed. The last of those calls was Janice Pilgrim, a regular fixture of Winsome's nightlife. Her serrated laughter could be heard a block away, and she painted every side comment with lipstick traces. She wasn't laughing now. She had fallen asleep in my hack, the red tip of her cigarette burning a hole. Her house along the river was surrounded by short trees with stubby branches. The house was small, blue, wood-framed, with white trim and a shallow gravel driveway. The front lawn was bald with dust. Through curtains of cold rain, a single streetlight cast silky shadows of marionette strings. I lugged her sideways from the cab, leaned her standing by the screen door while I knocked. A 10, 11-year-old skinny kid with wide-set eyes and short hair sighed. I couldn't tell if they were a boy or a girl, but the sigh revealed a rinse and repeat cycle. The scene with Mom had played out before. They guided their mother to the couch, covered with magazines, a crumpled up Aztec blanket, and a bowl of soggy cereal. We cleared a space, laid Mom down, and covered her face to the chin with the blanket. You going to be okay? The kid grinned and nodded grimly. How much does she owe you? On the coffee table, a row of pop bottles marked by bits of dead leaves that resembled dried specks of black flies. Breakfast. Many a night following a long shift, I returned to the cab stand only to see them, kids in the light of early morning, walking with their empties to get deposit money and maybe a candy bar. Don't worry about it. I'll square with her later. They nodded. I pulled a crumpled one from my jacket. That's for you. I smiled my smudge of a grin. Get yourself something. The kid looked at their bare feet, ashamed. That wasn't my intent. I finished filling out my call sheet, cleared, and I listened to everyone on their car radios gabbing over the stabbing. Emily Logan was in police custody. Her husband Tom wasn't the assailant. Tom Logan didn't stab Tom Reynolds. Emily Logan did, trying to break up a fight between her husband and lover. Who did the knife belong to, I wondered. Was it in Tom Logan's bag the whole time we talked alongside a phone booth? Nobody knew who the knife belonged to. And why would Tom Logan say Tom Reynolds was the wrong guy when Reynolds was sleeping with his wife? Hell of a way for Emily to break up a fight stabbing her lover. I had planned on doubling back to the hospital, but now that I knew Emily Logan and not Tom Logan had stabbed Reynolds, I saw no need. I'm no longer worried about what Tom Logan might do to his wife's lover. I worried what Tom Logan might do to Tom Logan. I drove aimlessly for another hour or so when the call came. Shell station on Roosevelt behind the armory. Tom was working late, spray job. Just walk in and get him, I was told. It didn't make sense. You don't do a spray job in the morning following a hard rain when the sky's wet. It took 5 minutes. The Shell station still echoed its Art Deco origins with its strong curves and heavy lines of chrome. Inside, the station's white light burned brightly, and the thick smell of paint filled the spaces between me and the car inspection pits. The tips of my ears and chest burned, a little lucky to calm myself. A Buick 55 sat in the light's glare, gleaming a metallic blue. Sprawled on a wooden workbench with a spray gun and cans of motor oil and wrenches. On the end of the bench was a pile of neatly folded clothes, trousers, dress shirt, underwear, socks. Dangling down one of the grease pits was Tom Logan, his neck twisted up in coiled wires. He had rigged himself to an engine hoist at the edge of the pit and stepped off. His hands were cupped in front of him, and he wore a white bathing cap and a woman's one-piece black and white swimsuit. He was a big man, and the fabric struggled to contain him. Under the empty gym bag, I found a note. Emily, I'm the wrong guy for you. Nature let us down. I jumped into the grease pit. He swayed gently. Wrong guy. Earlier that night, Logan wasn't talking about Reynolds. He was talking about himself. The wrong guy. I finished my cigarette. Briefly, I thought of unstrapping Tom from this grisly gizmo and dressing him back in his trousers and dress shirt, returning him to mid-1960s respectability. But there was something to this art tableau, something he wanted to say. And I guess he trusted me to find him and make sure that he had his say. Eventually, I called the police, but not right away. Instead, I sat with Tom for 30 or 40 minutes, sat in the pockets of quiet, and from deep in the hole, I saw the morning sky turn from a pastel orange to a cornflower blue, and the city's streetlights silently shutting off. And I'm just going to read a little bit from the beginning of the novel, since that is what I'm promoting. Game 1. Monday, September 2nd, 1972. Johnny Buckets and I stood outside his hot dog stand at Front Street in Union Station talking hockey. We called him Johnny Buckets because he wore cargo pants, and those damn side pockets were always packed with everything from loose change, gasoline company credit cards, a transistor radio, shot glasses from Niagara Falls, flashlights, and the occasional bottle of beer. It was as if buckets of well water were attached to his thighs. I don't think the commies will win a single game. He raised a tobacco-stained finger. Not a one. The sun was high, and I was shielding my eyes. Beto says if the Russians win game one, he'll lead his column with a bowl of borscht in front of the embassy. We'll kill them. Canadians are the greatest hockey players in the world. We all know that, Fuller. And this is our chance to prove it. Our NHL pros versus their so-called amateurs that live on the government dole. Damn, you saw them skate around the rink in their dinky wafer-thin helmets and hand-me-downs from a peewee club. Amateur hour, man. Well, Red Fisher, he's got us winning 6 games. It was an 8-game series, 4 in Canada, 4 in Moscow. Game 1 was tonight from Montreal. My dog was loaded with onions, green olives, and mustard. I took a big bite. I don't like ketchup on a dog, I said. Neither do folks in Chicago. Johnny rubbed at his chapped lower lip. It was the size of a leech. Still remember that goal you notched against the Blackhawks to win the Cup, 1962? That was 10 years ago. I'm 37 now and have a kid, Connie. Did you read Robertson's column? He's got the Russians winning 6 games. 6! Why doesn't that fucker move to Russia, goddamn traitor? Hey, he's a good writer. And he knew his hockey. And I couldn't help but wonder if we were all being conned, set up. When the arrows in the narrative point one direction, Canada will kick their asses, I get a little nervous. Russia has been winning world championships since the early 1950s. They won the last 3 Olympics. What do we really know about them? I have an eerie feeling. Yeah, you're a detective. You live in a world of feelings. He emphasized the latter word and shook his head with disapproval. I chuckled mildly. Johnny's whole tirade against the commies was based on feelings. You don't have a crystal ball in those pockets, do you, Johnny? Nah, wouldn't fit. He smiled, eyes widening. His teeth were orange and some were missing. Call me Nostradamus, he said. That cracked me up. How's the wife and kid? Good, good. Working on anything? Yeah, a young high school kid's meeting me in my office as soon as school gets out. I glanced at my Timex. About an hour, the Shoeshine Kill. Christ, Shoeshine Kill. He shook his head. I grew up around that neighborhood, Regent Park. Johnny looked at his shoes. Me too, I said. Cabbagetown. We all had been reading about it for 5 days. 16-year-old shoeshine boy Orlando Prescott stuffed down a roof duct on Charles Street, cigarette burns tattooing his naked body. The ends of his fingernails were chipped down, dusty pulp of silica from limestone found under his fingers. One of the dailies said he was sodomized. Orly was a product of the Regent Park housing district, crowded with other immigrants from the islands and Eastern Europe in little boxes. Orly was troubled, the paper said, and ran with sulky youth gangs. The Toronto Star labeled Orly a hustler. Traces of cocaine were found in his shine box. The Globe and Mail hinted that the kid may have been hustling sexual favors, turning tricks with the homosexual crowd at Young and Charles. I didn't know what to think, but 15-year-old Abby Monroe needed to talk to me. The newspapers had it all wrong, she insisted. I asked her directly, why me? Did you like the sound of my name or something? No, she said. 3 reasons. First, you grew up in a similar neighborhood, so you understand what it was to be a kid with my kind of background. Second, your revelations about surviving sexual abuse as a child, I read all about in the pages of the Star, and I was only 10, and it was really brave of you. And third, a broken man is a man who cares. You were my favorite hockey player when you played for the Leafs. You never took a shift off. I appreciated that, I said, and noted how polite she was over the phone. No guile, no phony nuance, just direct, honest. But she was just a kid. How could she afford my rate, $40 a day? My wife's a reporter, so I could do a little pro bono work, I guess. Anyway, I talked to her. Orly's death shook me up pretty good. 16, tortured, sexually assaulted. Suddenly, a 69 Valiant barreled toward me, its grill resembling the face of a snarling shark. Fuck! Johnny screamed as I leaped clear, and the hot dog cart crumpled and hammered into metal pieces that flashed in the air. The car then crunched a mailbox before stopping abruptly in front of Union Station. A hollow pole of a streetlight covered the car like a bent Q-tip. You okay? I shouted in Buckets' direction. My fucking cart isn't. I ran toward the Valiant, my face peppered with shrapnel scratches, the sun sparkling off the sidewalk in small star points. The driver staggered in my direction. He was 40-ish, big fellow with dusty blonde hair and nowhere eyes. He wore briefs, nothing else. A perforated snake line cut across his body. He struggled to hold in his guts, and then he fell. There was no color in his face, and within seconds, there were no breaths on his lips either. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Grant, for both readings. I have not, as I had confessed, I have not had a chance to dive in yet to your book, and I'm excited to get into the mystery. So thank you both. I will kick it off with a question that I'm selfishly curious about, for you both, and then we can take other questions. I'll open it up if people want to speak questions with their voices into the space, and like Ted said, you're also welcome to message myself or Ted with questions if you'd like, and we can uplift those during the question and answer portion as well. But I would, yeah, great question that's sort of related to mine, so we can sort of roll them in together. My question for you both is about setting and place, because I know, Grant, that these novels, yeah, that this book is set in Toronto, and when you and I talked, you mentioned, you do really specific research on place to make sure that it feels really accurate. And that, as we were already getting in your early reading from A Journey to El Ramel, right? Like the desert and this landscape play a really large role and are sort of a character in the book. And so I would love for you guys to speak a little bit to place and setting and the research that you do or have done into these places, whatever sparks your interest as far as talking about setting. And I would uplift the particular question in the chat, Dad, of what drew you to set your novel in this part of the world. So either of you is welcome to start. You can duel for it.
Brady, you go ahead.
Well, thank you, Hayes and Holly. That's wonderful questions. So this book began a very, very long time ago. I won't say I was a young man, but it was a while back. And at the time that I got the idea for this book, I was reading a lot of travel logs. And I had this interest in North Africa, North African history. And I was reading about travelers and French travelers and English travelers and Spaniards going out into the world, the age of colonial exploration. And I was reading in particular this diary of a French explorer, a young man, Michel Vauchange. And as I was reading his book, I got really interested in those kinds of journeys. Like who would undertake a journey to the middle of nowhere? Why? And as I was reading his actual diary, I had been reading all these other travelogues and diaries and histories of explorers, and they started kind of weaving together. And as I was reading his diary, I kept seeing all these and hearing all these other voices, all these other experiences, all these other travelers coming together. And so Hayes will know this, that around that time, Hayes's mom and I had arranged for a year abroad, that we had doing a faculty exchange in Toulouse in the south of France. And so I had all these travelers in mind, and I wanted to go to Morocco, and I wanted to see it. And so to bring this around to Holly's question a bit, what fascinated me in part also, besides all these travelers and adventurers who undertake these really dangerous journeys for very uncertain reasons, and for without guaranteed ability to return. But I got interested in the region south of Morocco that was in the 1930s called the Spanish Sahara. It's one of the few parts of the world that's not a country. It's huge. It's an immense space, but it's mostly desert. There's hardly anybody there. Morocco now claims it. In fact, I offered to send a copy of the novel to a friend of mine who teaches in Marrakesh, and he said, "No, please don't send it. The censors don't want anybody talking about the disputed territory." So I was fascinated both by these travelers and then this part of the world that wasn't a country and that had been disputed, and the Moors were the proper inhabitants, but they didn't have the power to make a country, and the Berbers, and so there's a lot of lines that went into it. I don't know if I'm nattering, but I don't know if I answered the question, but Yeah, all these travelers, all these adventures kind of kept coming together in my brain in this part of the world that nobody could quite claim. Yeah.
Thank you. And Grant, do you want to speak a little bit to place and
Yeah,
setting and that
sure.
character in your books?
I've talked about this before with friends and stuff. So I'll keep it brief, but the Winsome stories, I was really inspired by Ed McBain because he sets his 87th Precinct novels in a place called Isola, which is Italian for island, and it's like New York, but it's not New York. So I wanted to be freed up to go wherever my imagination takes me, and so my Winsome is, like I said at the beginning of the reading, Peterborough, Ontario, mixed with Seneca Falls, with upstate New York, Webster City, Iowa, which I've been to and has an armory right in the heart of, really close to downtown. And so that was kind of my inspiration for that. And I wanted a place of about 58,000 people, which is not quite a city in my eyes. I'm from a big city, so to me that's a town, but I know it's technically a city. But I wanted something kind of small but big enough to have some bad goings on, if that makes sense. Um, and then with respect to the Hayden Fuller stories, I grew up in Toronto, and the farther you get away from something, the more you start to appreciate. And so there's this love for the Toronto that was part of my childhood and my teenage years, and so I returned to that in the novels. And I think part of the what they called the golden age detective stories that were written in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. I wanted to set my work in the 60s so I could be in that tradition and not have to worry so much about CSI kind of stuff, where you actually make a phone call, you got to get to a phone booth. You don't have a cell phone, things like that. And so he's often running off to a phone booth or whatever to, make a call or whatever. So yeah, and I love Toronto. So, but it's definitely a Toronto of a certain time period that I remember somewhat fondly, but also with a critical eye because uh, it wasn't as diverse as it is now, and I was often othered by people because of being Macedonian, and I grew up in a very Scottish, English, Irish neighborhood, and so I was I always felt a little bit like I didn't belong, um, and so that's what I kind of want to capture a little bit in the time period that I set the piece.
Thank you, thank you. Have some questions in the chat and then can open it up to people speaking as well. But a couple questions from Justice about the drafting process and the editing process. So how long did it take you to write these books in years and or months of active writing? Because as Dad alluded to, he's been working on this book since my early childhood, in more and less active ways. But so for both of you, that kind of length of the writing process, and then how much of your original manuscript made it through the editing process to the final product. Grant, do you want to take this one first to mix it
Sure.
up?
Well, I don't want to undervalue myself or have people think I'm some kind of hack, but I write my novels in about 40 days. I, I see my inspiration is George Simenon, who I really love his McGray books, and uh, he wrote quickly. I write quickly. It's not to say I don't revise, but I don't labor over every sentence. I don't worry about every word I'm putting on the page. I compose quickly, and so the novels only average about 60,000 words, and I'm able to pound out a draft, like I said, in about 40 days. Sorry to get all biblical on people, but that's just, I don't know why, that's how it works for me. And then um, I put it aside to cool off, and then I go back and revise. With the last novel, it went through a lot of, I don't want to say edits, but um, I had a lot of conversations with Ted about it because I was I started getting enamored with this idea of free and direct discourse and creating uncertainty in the reader that I wanted to match the uncertainty that the detective feels. But then Ted was like, well, it's just going to confuse people. Like, is this being spoken? Is this the character's thoughts? Is this just dialogue without quotes around it? Um, And so I really cleaned up this draft, and I kind of got M dash happy. I ended almost every line of dialogue with an M dash, and I've went back over that. So that process probably took an additional 3 to 4 weeks to clean up, and then worked with Ted to make it accessible. Not to make it simple, but to make it accessible. Because I don't want just academics to read my stuff. I want all kinds of people to read it. I want my dad. He's no longer with us, but I think about my dad when I write, and he liked Mickey Spillane, and I'd like people like that to read my work.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant. Dad, how about you? Active writing versus years of cogitation and trips to Morocco? I sort of thought we should find some pictures of us in the desert, but it seemed hard to coordinate that across distance.
Yeah, no, yeah, I have those pictures. It's funny. Ted, Grant, and I have a podcast, A Lesson Before Writing, that Ted originated. And we talk about writing and publishing, journals and books, and we talk about a lot of different things. And one of the things we've discovered, I think, or I've discovered over the course of our conversations, is how different we are in working techniques. And so I write and revise constantly, and I'm so admiring of Grant. Like I the A Journey to Al Ramel. I wrote it. I wrote the original draft. So the answer, I would say, probably 2 years of writing time, and then 1 year of a first word to last word rewrite, a whole scale revision. But yeah, I revise all the time, and Ted will tell you and how not to make friends with your publisher. But I worry about every single word constantly. And so Ted would say, "Well, so how's the draft?" And I would send him. I would change a single word in a sentence, or revise a sentence, or chop a sentence and put in another one. So yeah, I never stop, and I'm trying to be more Grant-like, in truth. So the book I'm working on now, I promised myself in the first place. It's a collection of short stories that I would write in the Grant spirit and not in the endless revision that I am prone to.
Now, if anybody caught my sarcastic eye roll, Dad calls me every couple weeks and says he's tired of writing and he's going to hang up his hat and publishing is such a racket and he's worked too hard. And then here he is, another book. Grant, did you come off mute to say something?
Well, I saw a great question from Jeremy.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, can you talk about the relative challenges of writing short versus long form narrative? And I'd like to tackle that because since I read a short story, and I love writing short stories. Because I'm a junkie that way. I need a narrative fix. I don't take drugs or drink. So my fix is writing, and the short stories give me that in a quick time. I don't have to work on them for 40 days. Um, the other thing I like is having a word count. A lot of the journals I send crime stories to, they say the sweet spot's 5,000 words, and they don't recommend you sending them anything longer than 5,500 words. So you have to make choices. When you're in the novel form, I'll develop this idea and I'll develop that idea. But in the short story, I mean, I really try to paint really quick pictures. Uh, and my hard-boiled style fits that well, but I can't go off on a nice descriptive moment on what the room looks like. Whereas like Raymond Chandler would have 5 paragraphs on everything that's in the room, and I'll have 2 sentences and just decide that's just how I got to do it to get within the 5,000 word limit. So it's that's tricky. But it's also kind of fun because it just streamlines everything, and I enjoy that. With the novels, I like having more space to develop side stories. But in both cases, things always surprise me and things take over. And my very first novel, The Killer Changed, No, the second novel, The Killer Changed. No, pardon me, the third novel, The Killer Changed. About halfway through, and I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. Let's go with that. So things like that. I just, I love it, and I like both forms a lot. And with the short stories, you can't have that many characters, and there's just all that kind of practical nuts and bolts stuff. And yeah, that's what I got to say about that, I guess.
Thanks, Grant. Dad, do you have anything you want to throw in about short versus long form fiction?
Well, I will just say that I really enjoy the discipline of short fiction because the books I really love, the things that I really like to read are the massive meandering digressive works like Moby Dick or Tristram Shandy, uh, Infinite Jest. I like the long Gothic novels, the Brontes, and so I'm really drawn to the long form. But I think the discipline of the short story form, I think that's where I think that's a discipline that really teaches you how to write or how to how to be economical and precise, and then let that skill carry into the bigger forms. So I sort of think of stories as keeping me honest.
I appreciate that. And I got a direct message, so I'll throw you one more question down if I can put you on the spot, and then we'll take Heather's question. But a friend messaged me and asked about writing inspirations, and particularly that the passage you read reminded this person of Borges. That it felt sort of they felt wonderfully lost listening to you read, where you can't quite discern whether the names and places are real or imagined and embellished, and the detailed descriptions that are overwhelming but seem to maybe cast mystery over the plot, which I think is well diagnosed. And I know, my initial reaction or comparison that I had mentioned to you is a Vonnegut, because if people have not read the book yet, there's some mysterious like movement through time. So I'm curious if either of those comparisons feel interesting to you, or just thinking about like, yeah, literary figures that you would maybe like in the book too, or genre conventions, if there's any.
Oh,
Good company to be compared to Borges and Vonnegut. So
oh, yikes. Yes. Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, Borges, of course, absolute favorite. I think maybe even more so Vonnegut. Vonnegut seems like I had a phase with Vonnegut as a young person and just read wall to wall. But certainly Slaughterhouse-Five and the leaps in place and time really influenced my writing here. And then, in truth, um, uh, the journey to Al Ramel has, and I won't. There's no spoil. I won't give any spoilers. But the journey to Al Ramel, Borges is very much on my mind, and I just. There's something so precise, and the idea of being in a labyrinth. There's something so precise in Borges's language and his imagery, but the idea of being lost in a labyrinth, I think there's something of that to Bernard's journey to Al Ramel. So I'm not sure who posed the questions behind you, but yeah, three cheers, because that's very uh, perceptive, or you're talking about things that I love.
there we go. That was my friend Oscar. I'll put him on the spot. Thanks for coming, Oscar.
Thank you.
And Grant, I mean, you write in such a particular genre that has strong associations, and many people, who we think of when we think of the mystery genre. But I'm curious if you want to speak to any influences, or maybe like writers you take from that are not in genre fiction too, just like who some of your inspirations are in the
Yeah.
in the writing.
Well, obviously, with respect to the genre, Raymond Chandler is my favorite writer, and I don't quite write as, I don't know if romantic's the right word, lush prose as Chandler, but I admire the morality in Chandler's work. I the idea of the tarnished knight, down these streets, mean streets, a man must go. I mean, that's kind of what my characters are like. They try to do the right things. They don't always do the right things, but they're they're basically good people trying to make the world a better place. So they're not alcoholics like Chandler's characters, but I respect Chandler for a kind of vision of morality, whereas you could look at the Mickey Spillane books, and I love the pure energy of Spillane and the violence. But there's a bit of sadism. There's some issues, sexism, misogyny, things like that, that take away from all that energy that I love so much about his work. But Spillane would also be an influence. And then, and from Spillane, what I like is the gotcha endings. I like surprising people. So I don't know if y'all noticed, but my the short story I read was very much influenced by Joyce. Um, the ending is my riff on Araby. So I really like James Joyce as a writer, and the idea of all the lights shutting off and the kid being on the center stage. It's like a spotlight on him at the end as he talks about being derided with vanity. And I wanted to reverse that by having it be daylight. So when the lights come off, you have light. But there's I don't know. I was just like it was my Joycean moment there. So I love Joyce, and I also love Bernard Malamud, who deals a lot with suffering, and so both my characters have been victims of abuse. Hayden in terms of sexual abuse, and Eddie from having served in Korea. There was also violent abuse in his past with a series of dads, but in terms of what he saw in wartime, has shaped him to a certain degree. I think of Eddie as my Sam Spade. He's a little tougher, not quite as moral, questionable, and Hayden's my Philip Marlowe.
Very cool. Thank you. It's such a great aspect of the genre of mystery detective fiction, right? Like you have these detective characters who have personalities unto themselves and sort of take on a life of their own. Dad and I always talk about how Agatha Christie just felt tortured by Poirot, like he kind of followed her around his her whole life. I'd love to uplift Heather's question here from the chat. You both have such perfect and precise narrator voices, even in short excerpts, and they're so different from each other. How and when do you develop the narrator voice? Early, in revision, etc.? When do you really start thinking about and developing voice in the writing process, and how do you do it? Which is a fantastic question.
Brady, why don't you take that one first? I'm still mulling that one over.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I mean, again, part of what is so much fun, and I need to say, all of this is so much fun. Like the writing of books, and the reading of books, is just so much fun. So, but to get to the question, and I've been rereading. I'll just throw this out. I've been rereading. We're taking our show on the road. I won't belabor this, but Grant, Ted, and I have been invited to do our podcast live, and we're doing a Halloween themed show. So I've been rereading some of Ted's books. So much fun, so creepy, and what the heck is going on, and so brilliantly written. Anyway, to Heather's question, when I began conceiving of a journey to Al Ramel, I made a very meticulous list, and I think this reveals working habits. I made a very meticulous list, and I spent several weeks on it. What was Bernard like? What were his interests? What did he? What were his compulsions? What were his complexities? And I just had a running list, and I never wrote a word I never started the novel until I had what I thought was this character in mind. He had a backstory, he had a family, he had a brother, and he had, as I say, these obsessions, and hopefully these complexities and these interests. And I had to map that all out before I could even begin to try to tell a story. So I front loaded the voice and the personality and the character. So I don't know how anybody else works, but that's what I did on this occasion.
Cool. Grant, how about you?
Wow. I don't know. Trying to figure this out. You know, well, with the Eddie Sands stories, he's got a tougher voice. Like again, I'm going to draw a connection to crime lit. The Hayden Fuller stories, it's as if they were written by Donald Westlake, and the Eddie Sands stories, it's as if they were written by Richard Stark. They're both the same person, but Westlake, when he wrote the Richard Stark novels, Parker novels, took on a pseudonym because they were tougher, and so there's a tougher voice there. He's got more of an edge. He's they're both sensitive. Eddie's Hayden is more like McGray in the sense of not judging. He tries to listen and not judge people. And Eddie is a little more quick to judgment and to violence to get answers. And the thing with the Eddie stories is they're not always in first person. It'll surprise me. Like the Hayden stories are always in first person. But sometimes I'll be writing a story and I just feel like I want to do this in third person, limited third. And so I don't know why that happens, but I have a story coming out in Black Cat Weekly that is Eddie Sands' story in limited third. I don't know. I don't know why that choice happened, but something in the process, that was the voice that was coming to me. And so it gave a little more distance, and it seemed to fit a story about a missing girl and a bunch of cab drivers working together to find her before the sun comes up, because that's when the serial killer kills people. It's just as sunrise, and so all these cabbies are working together. But for some reason, that was the voice I chose for that. So I don't have a great answer. The other thing is Hayden's more of a smartass. He's he's got a little streak of Holden Caulfield to him. And Eddie's not as funny. So that's all I can say. I don't know what else to say about it, but they're both near and dear to my heart, and they're both parts of me, but different aspects of my personality.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you everyone again for joining us. I know there's like innumerably more interesting questions and discussion to have about these books. I would recommend the podcast, A Lesson Before Writing, if you want to hear more from Ted, Grant, and Dad about, or sorry, Brady Harrison, formerly Brady to you all, about writing and craft of writing and their other works. And as Dad mentioned, they're going to Iowa next week to do a live taping of the show. So everyone, yeah, I put the links in the chat for the 12 Winters site where you can find books that Grant and my father, again, Brady to you, have published with 12 Winters. Check out the podcast, check out their writing. And yes, and reach out through 12 Winters if you have further questions or want to discuss these books more. And hope everyone has a lovely evening and a happy fall. Thank y'all for being here.
So much fun.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. That was
Thank
great.
you. It was fun.
Thank y'all.